Hello, everyone. This is our behavior change project. We did it on a study called The Effects of Video Self-Evaluation on Skills Acquisition with Yoga Poses. Our group members are Christy Bowen, Courtney Crowley, myself, Joshua Goldstein, Maria Kosman, Savannah Paddock, and Lawrence Signer. We're going to start with talking about some other literature that is related to video self-evaluation or self-evaluation. And we're going to start with a study about a kindergarten age boy who was non-compliant to his mother's instructions, and he was neurotypical, and his mom sought professional help have more appropriate behaviors and to comply to his mom's instructions. So what the study involved was having the mother give the boy 6 instructions, and they used a regression design where they had 3 phases. One was baseline, the other was self-evaluation, another was maternal evaluation. In the self-evaluation phase, the child was just asked if he was complied with the instructions, and he could say if he did or not, and then he would give himself a token. And if he got 4 out of 6 tokens, then he was able to get a reward. In the maternal feedback phase, the mom would give him feedback whether or not he did or did not, and he also continued to self-evaluate. This study showed that the rates of him complying was highest during the maternal evaluation phase, and that included self-evaluation. It was a little bit lower when he was self-evaluating, but they noticed that the boy always was giving himself high praise, even if he wasn't on task. Another study that was done was taught kids social interacting strategies when interacting with a child with autism. This study tested whether or not self-evaluation strategies could help preschool neurotypical children interact with the child with autism. Interaction is important for children with autism, and the more interaction they have, the more socially developed they become. It's important because some students with disabilities don't have social interaction because their peers don't know how to interact with them. So what they did was they had 3 phases: a baseline phase, and then they had a phase where they trained the participants in facilitated communication, which included teaching them strategies to go up to their peers and ask them to play with them, to share with them, to model what their peers with autism were doing. And then they had another phase where students were taught to self-evaluate if they were doing these strategies that were taught in the facilitated communication training. And during the study, they saw that during training, it remained stable to where their baseline was. But when the students started self-evaluating themselves, their interactions with the students with autism increased a lot. Another study that was done was to help staff members implement a behavioral procedure for a student with autism. Some of these staff members had low fidelity scores when they were implementing the behavior plan. So what they did was staff members were trained on a video to score somebody implementing the behavior plan, and then they watched videos of themselves doing it from their baseline, and they showed that 2 out of the 3 participants were able to get 100% on their integrity scores when they implemented the program. And now Christy will talk about some other studies.
So I'm going to quickly overview a couple of other studies that use self-evaluation. The first study that I'm going to talk about is in a class of nursing students. There was a control group and an experimental group. In the control group, they were asked to apply Foley catheters, and the target acquisition skill in this case is the application of Foley catheters. The control group continued the application as they were, whereas the experimental group in this case was recorded. After the recordings, they were asked to evaluate their performance once they watched the recordings back, and then send their evaluation of their performance to their professors. In this study, they saw that the group that underwent the intervention saw increases in their accuracy in Foley catheter application. Another study that used evaluation didn't have a I'm screwing this up, guys. Didn't have a grading system. However, it was used with young girls in a gymnastics class. In this case, the girls performed a gymnastics pose and was recorded while doing it. And then they were asked to view their pose. Once they viewed their pose, they also viewed a model, a professional model, doing the same exact pose. Though they didn't engage in any sort of grading of their pose, they were then evaluating their pose compared to the model pose and were asked to go back and engage in the skill right after watching the model's pose, model's video. In this study, they also saw that all the girls began to see increases in the accuracy of their gymnastics poses. I'm going to give it back to Josh, who's going to talk about the purpose of the study.
All right. The study that we are replicating is called the Effects of Video Self-Evaluation on Skill Acquisition with Yoga Poses. It was done by Downs, Miltenberger, Bronsky, and Witherspoon in 2015. And the purpose of their study was to test if video self-evaluation was an effective method to increase the accuracy of yoga poses when learning a new skill. Yoga is an important can be a very effective tool to increase muscle strength and endurance, but if not done properly, it can lead to injury. So they want to see if the way people learn it, which is typically just people going to class and being instructed by their instructor to just perform and model it in class, whether, if not video evaluation will help people do the yoga poses accuracy. And we decided to do this study because we were all novices to yoga and we wanted to learn it as a new skill and we wanted to do it safely and with a high degree of accuracy.
There were 6 participants total in our behavior change project, and the participants ranged in age from 24 to 27. There were 5 females and 1 male. Each of the participants were able to do the yoga poses, but there were some limitations. 2 of the participants were pregnant, and 1 of the participants had to drop out around the 10th session because of medical reasons. And for the settings, these varied across the participants. Most of the sessions took place in the home setting. 2 of the participants were on vacation for a few of the baseline sessions, and these were taking place in hotel rooms.
Are we going to talk about the participant setting from the original study in this section too?
What?
Should we also talk about the original study in the participant setting section?
We can.
Okay. All right.
We'll add that in.
Yeah.
Can you hide the box at the bottom of the PowerPoint?
Thank you.
All right, so the materials needed to engage in this study are a camera with recording, a laptop, optional yoga mat, a room with enough room to engage in yoga moves that was clear of any obstacles or anything that could potentially get in the way. We had to have access to the internet to gain access to the yoga video links from Yoga Journal, as well as to communicate with our partners, give the videos, receive videos, as well as we had to have the task analysis of each yoga pose available.
Okay, the behaviors that we targeted in our study were the same as the ones in the original study. It was the tree pose, the warrior two pose, and the downward facing dog pose. The tree pose is defined as placing the weight of the body into your left foot while your right foot is pressed into your inner thigh. Hands are pressed together in front of your body at chest level, and eyes are looking forward at a focal point to stay balanced for at least 30 seconds. As you can see in the video we have in the presentation. The next pose is the warrior two pose. This is defined as standing with your feet 3.5 to 4 feet apart, arms parallel to the floor, reached out to the side with palms down. Your feet will be turned, one slightly inward and the other to a 90-degree angle. You bend your front knee over your ankle so your shin is completely vertical. Next, extend your arms out and look over your shoulder towards your right fingers, holding the pose for at least 30 seconds. And our third pose is the downward facing dog pose. It's defined as having your hands and feet on the ground while the arms, back, and legs are straightened and head is in to look toward the shins, holding this pose for at least 30 seconds, as you can see in this video as well. For our data collection, we utilized a task analysis, as you can see on the screen. We have 3 different task analysis for each pose. The tree pose, you can see on the left side of the screen, has 9 different sets. Each participant went through, we recorded ourselves, and we used this task analysis to grade ourselves on each pose. On each step, you would either mark a plus or a minus, a plus for a correct step or a minus for an incorrect step. And the percentage was calculated from the correct number of steps out of 9 for the tree pose, go back to the last one, and out of 10 for the warrior two pose, and then you can go to the next slide, and then out of 6 for our downward dog facing pose.
So I'm going to talk about the baseline that was collected in both the original study and the replication project. The research design used in this project was a multiple baseline across behaviors design. And in baseline, both the participant and the researcher were present in the original study. Sessions were typically about 10 minutes in length. During the baseline, the researcher acted as a model for the poses in just the first 2 sessions. So the researcher modeled the poses that they wanted the participant to engage in, and then had the participant engage in those poses. During baseline phase, no feedback was given to the participant, just a thank you for engaging in the skill. Next slide, Josh.
Yeah, I did. All right, there goes.
In our study for baseline, there was the fact that we weren't all in the same room when baseline was conducted. So what we did is we videoed our baseline sessions and another individual in our group. We then sent another individual in our group the video of our baseline session so that they were able to grade our baseline poses. For baseline in our replication project, the other participant in the group would use the task analysis to grade our baseline poses. Similarities are that no feedback was provided to the participant that was engaging in the poses, so there was no conversations or feedback provided on on the poses, as well as the participant engaging in the skill didn't graph their own skill, the other participant graphed for them and would let them know when another pose was ready to enter the intervention phase. In baseline, once pose became steady, one pose was then introduced in intervention at a time, and then once intervention data was steady, another pose was introduced for intervention. Another similarity of our baseline and the original study's baseline is that no participants engaged in yoga outside of the study. So requirement is that no one continued to do yoga anywhere outside of the study that was being conducted. Once the phase was in intervention, that we then began continuing to record our poses, and now we would use our task analysis to grade our own poses. And this was the same in both baseline or intervention in the original study and intervention in our replication study. So participants graded their poses from the task analysis and were in that evaluating their skill level. In this phase, participants did graph their own percentages and their own successes. Some differences from the replication study and the original study is a major difference was that in the original study, researchers sat with the participants in the first 2 sessions to train them on how to use the task analysis and to correctly give them feedback on when a correct score was to be given and when an incorrect score was to be given. However, in our replication study, we were unable to do that part due to the fact that we were all very far away from each other. So that we didn't do, I'm just gonna skip over that. I'm not gonna say it. So in our replication study, that no coaching was given on how to grade our task analysis, where in the original study, once treatment fidelity fell low, the researchers would then reconduct a session with the participants to reteach them how to use the task analysis appropriately. This was not done in our replication study due to the distance of each group member. I will now go on to Courtney to discuss IOA and treatment fidelity.
Courtney, you're muted.
Thank you. IOA data was collected during the intervention phase. In the original study, IOA data was calculated on 33% of all of the video recording sessions for each participant. Our group used this percentage as well. The percentage of agreement was calculated by utilizing the following calculation. Number of agreements divided by the number of steps in the corresponding task analysis, then multiplied by 100 to receive a percentage. We also utilized another participant within the group to code their videos and compare to the task analysis. And the results are as followed. Lauren was at 96%, Christy was at 100%, Josh 89.25%, Savannah 90.2%, Maria 95%, and myself, Courtney, at 94%.
Did we lose the results section? Oh. Okay. Are we missing a slide?
Yeah, I was at treatment fidelity next. Is
Okay.
there one in between us?
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'll do
I think I skipped it. All right. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. Treatment integrity was tested by calculating the percentage of agreement for occurrences of correct poses during the task analysis completion and the self-evaluation videos. We used the interval by interval IOA formula, which is dividing the number of agreements by the number of steps in the task analysis, then multiplied by 100, which is converted the results into a percentage. Treatment fidelity was also divided between two groups to replicate the study's divide in participants. 50% of videos were scored for Group A and 38% of sessions for Group B. Group A included Courtney, Joshua, and Maria. Courtney, myself, my results were 89 to 100%. Maria was 50 to 81%, and Joshua was 75 to 100%. Group B included Lauren, Savannah, and Christy, and their scores were, for Lauren, 83 to 100%, Savannah, 83 to 100%, and Christy was 71 to 100%. 3 participants, Christy, Joshua, and Maria, did report fidelity scores under 80%.
Our results show that there was an increase of yoga poses when video self-evaluation, or VSE, was implemented. When interpreting the data, the baseline is doing the 3 yoga poses without guidance. The VSE allowed the participants to evaluate the yoga pose, gain correct steps per the task analysis, and improve their percentages during the intervention. The data can be analyzed as if there is a positive correlation seen, the intervention worked. If there is a negative correlation, the intervention did not work. If there is no trend, there would have been no impact by the intervention. During our project, the intervention did have an impact, and our data presented a functional relationship. This implies that the behavior changes with changes of an independent variable. Our dependent variable of the yoga pose was impacted by the independent variable of the self-evaluation. The functional relation can be seen when the VSE was implemented and the change of data shifted to higher percentages. You can go ahead and change when I start talking about the higher percentages. This is the demonstration of the functional relationship. Figure 2, you can change when I start talking, yeah. Figure 2, showing Christy's poses, shows a strong functional relationship, while 3 and 5 of Lauren and Josh do as well. Where are 3 and 5?
3's on the left. We should probably put these in order that you're going to talk about them.
Yeah, so then figure 2 can be first, and then 3 and 5 can be on the next slide together.
Okay,
so I can change that, yeah. The other graphs may have dips, but this does not disrupt the trend of our results. Are you understand?
So some limitations were noted throughout the study. As we mentioned earlier, there were 2 members of the study that were pregnant that made the semester. 1 member, myself, had to drop out after 10 sessions due to medical necessity. And there was no in-person yoga instructor, as the original study had to work with the participants during baseline. In conclusion, the original study was the first yoga video self-evaluation to be conducted. Immediate feedback from reviewing video self-evaluation led the participants to successfully increasing accuracy in poses. By requiring a participant to review and score task analysis based on their current performance, skill accuracy began to improve. Functional relationship between baseline and intervention was present.